You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Call. I've got Brad Hunt here beside me. Today's guest is Jeremiah Plyer. This is episode 3 of 4 that we recorded with Jeremiah. He is the owner of Wilde Arrow Archery Shop. On this episode, we have a general discussion about archery. We get into arrow flight, front of center.
Yeah, correct.
Fletching, like true helical or not, 4-fletch, 3-fletch, big vanes, arrow builds.
Yep.
We talk about our arrow builds. We talk about...
You talk about like a parallax of an arrow and how much grains and weight, with the FOC and
we
not
also
FOC.
We get into, it's kind of a sticky subject because I'll probably piss some people off because I'm an opinionated fella. I welcome everyone disagreeing with me. I don't care. Like, disagree away.
Yep.
I don't get offended by that. But other people, when I challenge their ideas, they often get a little bent out of shape. It's like,
hot.
Dude, get over it. Look, everybody, there's more than one way to skin a cat. We more or less discuss arrow builds, and that gets to be contentious sometimes, or people get married to their setups. We just talk about the difference in some ways, the difference between a hunting arrow.
Yep.
That's over 500 grains, or at least for your size, heavy, compared to other arrow builds that are out there.
Correct.
That we often see. And I see, and we cover this in the show, we see these situations where you have a really good target archer, and then they bring that target archery bow to tack, and they're shooting like a tack rig, an attack arrow setup, and all of that or a 3D arrow rig, a 3D arrow setup, instead of like their hunting rig.
Yep.
Shooting with your hunting rig with a really heavy arrow is a totally different ball game than hunting with those 380 grain arrows.
Well, and it gives you a fantastic chance to really figure out your gear in hunting type situations with what you're going to use for hunting.
If you're a nerd and you really want to get really good at 3D, and you're an archery nerd and that's your thing, and you have multiple setups and all that, and that's fine. I think a lot of listeners, though, might look at some rigs and some shooters that go to the Total Archery Challenge and then be a little disappointed in, let's say, the fact that you have a totally different setup that's shooting for hunting.
Right.
And hunting rigs are not the same.
No.
Especially when you're going with a hyper lightweight 3D arrow setup, big old weights on the front and on the sides, and you're talking about a different bow. And I think it's worth the conversation. So we get into that. I want to use these 3D courses as preparation for my hunts. I'm not really interested in target archery that much. I enjoy competing with everybody, but really my end goal is I want to get more animals, and I want to be successful on an archery hunt.
Yep.
That's the end goal. So I want to get all the gear and the equipment that in fact, if I could shoot the tack with broadheads, I'd love to do that too.
Exactly.
So that's where I'm at. And I think we get into that in this discussion. It's a good discussion. We also talk about Jeremiah's upcoming sheep hunt. He drew a bighorn sheep tag, archery only.
Desert
in the state of Utah. And I'm going to film that with him. It's going to be 3 to 4 weeks. Hopefully we get it done in 5 days, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, it's a good discussion. You're going to enjoy this one. If you want to win a $4,000 hunt package, all you got to do right now is go shop at Initial Ascent, and every $10 you spend over there will get you entered to win. You got 2 weeks. In the next 2 weeks, shop over there. We're going to get a random number of names, multiply you times the $10 you spent, get the entries figured out, pick a winner, and
I'm going to beat Brian in another shootout.
And the $4,000 package is yours if you win. So anyway, that's great. Those guys, Dennis and Joe, that own Initial Ascent, are awesome guys. So we love to support them, and they support us. Like I said, you don't have to buy a backpack. They got kit sacks. They got air pads. They got water bladders. They got bottle holders. They got a whole bunch of stuff over there that you could get in on, or an Initial Ascent hat or shirt or anything. Yep. Every $10 gets you an entry and in to win, and we'll pick that soon. And then Mountain Ops has a big discount going on right now. If you use the code GRITTY, you can save 20% off at Mountain Ops and get some last-minute supplies over there. And if you need any other last-minute gear, just some items that are out there, because the season is upon us, go shop at Go Hunt. Those are hunters just like us. They support hunting. They got our values. Shop over there. Don't shop at some of these other big box stores. Just shop at Go Hunt and use the code GRITTY over there and help us out, help them out. We appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy this episode and stay gritty. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Call. I've got Brad Hunt here beside me, and we are back with Jeremiah Plyer at the Wilde Arrow Archery Shop in Centerville, Utah. And on this episode, Jeremiah wanted to talk to you about arrows, arrow builds, and tie it back to our Total Archery Challenge video that we just recorded. Brad had some issues with his arrows, okay? And you can see it in slow motion as you watch. I think he brought 4 or 5 arrows.
I brought 5 arrows.
5 arrows, okay? And he was cocky, and he's like, arrow 1, I am going to shoot the whole course.
It's a lighted knock, and I'll shoot the whole
It's a lighted green knock. I had red. And so he was going to, and he had fire knocks in there, and he was going to go and do this thing.
I had the halo knocks.
You had the halo knocks?
Correct. I had the halo knock on that one, but on the green one. The others were the fire knocks with the practice inserts.
Gotcha.
He lost that knock on like target 2 when he sent it into the bushes.
I had a piece of grass got stuck in my QAD rest.
Oh no!
It literally was like wrapped in there, and so his launcher didn't work. That's what he says. Yeah. I think he stuck that grass in afterward.
I've got plenty of excuses too. If you
promise
need to borrow some for me, just let me know. I have
You can see it on the film. If you go back and watch the film, like I shoot, and I'm like,
it's a mystery.
It is like, what just happened? We get to the next target, and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
It seems like with Brad, there's always something.
Whatever.
Always something. So then the next thing, so then he had to dip into the next set of arrows. And the day before, or 2 days before, I had given him a bunch of fire knock components and stuff so he could rig it out, And I had a whole bunch of green ones sitting around. So I gave him a bunch of the green because I shoot the red. And I'm like, here, take these green. But I had these practice knocks that I got from your shop that you guys had for years. They don't even look like the knocks that are in the fire knock system now.
Yeah.
And so what I had is I had the circuit board in there, and I didn't want to use those because I'm like at tack. So I kept the red knock, pulled those out to put the practice inserts in.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the little metal inserts that are used for the fire knock system. So let's back up a little bit for folks that don't know. I've been shooting the fire knock system, and there's a little bushing that you super glue into the back end of the shaft.
Yep.
And it creates like a stopper. And then there I can drop my battery in and a circuit board and then the knock. And they're in that little, they get put in that little chamber.
Yep.
And then when you shoot, the circuit board feels the inertia, turns on the light, and then the light, you can turn it off by tapping it and so forth. And I like those knocks for a number of reasons. They have their drawbacks, not to mention their cost. But I've been shooting them for quite a long time now. And I don't recommend a shop install them or sell them because they truly are a pain in the ass. But as a hobbyist, as someone who's rigging my own stuff, I love them. And I'll tell you why later on. But I gave Brad one thing I noticed one day was the stuff you gave me. They're practice knocks. I was like, it doesn't matter. They don't need batteries,
right?
So you can put the stopper in and have all your dozen arrows set up with this bushing in there, and then you can just, instead of using your circuit board and your batteries and all that, you can put a little weight in there, like a little aluminum or something weight.
Same length and weight as the actual circuit board.
Yep.
Basically, you're just replacing the battery in the circuit board.
So you can slide that in and just put a knock on it, and then you're not shooting your actual fire knock.
Yeah, break or lose one, it's easier to replace for sure.
Exactly.
Much cheaper.
It's cheap. So what I noticed was that bag of ancient fire knock target tips that you had a slightly different length of metal shaft that matched the knock that went on the end, the green knock.
Yeah.
If you put that metal shaft in and you put a red knock on it, they don't match up. Mm-hmm. They're not the same depth.
Gotcha.
So didn't think about it. So I grabbed my arrows that morning and I was like, well, I'm going to take the circuit boards out, popped out, kept the knock,
but put in
the circuit board, but put in that green practice insert
without the old knocks that match.
I didn't change the knocks. I left the new red knocks in there, which are smaller throat.
Yeah. For the light.
For the light.
Yeah.
So then what happened was he was losing knocks left and right.
25 targets, 25 target, or number 25, I lost my 5th knock.
So they're just flying out of the shaft?
So as he shoots, so I imagine they weren't seated all the way down and because of that height. Yeah. So as he would shoot, the pressure, try to leave the string, and every second or third shot, whoop, you'd see the weight come flying out, and his red knock would go flying out in slow motion. You could see these components.
My focus was still there. Good shot.
These components would fly everywhere. It would sound awful. But it would have this slight pull, right? Yeah. Like at the very end, and then lose components. And he was still hitting 10 rings.
That's awesome.
It was shooting good. That's what I'm saying. When I get back to, we've been shooting enough, and with my experience and working with you guys a lot, like I could tell that was not a me factor.
Right.
That was an equipment factor going on.
So this happens throughout. And so it doesn't look good for fire knock if you don't have the explanation.
Correct.
Basically the practice knock, which is green, which goes with that practice weight is designed differently than the one designed for the light that actually goes with the circuit board.
The cavity probably is a little different.
Correct.
Sure, the light's smaller, the red,
what I'm
the
thinking
cavity
too
bigger
is
on the
because I did notice, and I think about it, I did notice there's a little bit, like if I bump my arrow, I could hear a little bit of a tick sound or something.
Yeah, I could hear it
a little rattle. What I think it is because they're different. There's a little bit of space in that practice insert.
Yep.
And so as the inertia of the arrow takes off, just that little bit of space sends that practice aluminum rod back.
But also the newer practice ones do line up.
Correct.
So if you get the new components from Fire Knock, you can swap. It doesn't matter.
Now they're more interchangeable.
They're interchangeable.
And then the nice thing too is if you want to run a green versus red knock for hunting, now I guess you have that option.
But I also don't know if these were like Gen 1 versions that you had.
They were pretty old.
Because the knock isn't the same style. It doesn't have a little like braille line on it
on
there.
The side.
Yeah, and there's a few other things it's missing. Yeah. And so how I figured that out was I pulled the board out, and then I put this practice thing in, and then I put the knock on it, and it wouldn't seat.
Yeah, the knock wouldn't go all the way in the shaft.
Wouldn't go all the way in the shaft. And I'm like, come on. Yeah. And I pulled it out, and I put the components back in, and it fit.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, what the hell? And I had a whole bunch of other ones I had already done. So I grabbed those, and I pulled it out, and I took that weight, and I put it in that one, and it fit. And I'm like, dude, what the heck? So then I went back, and I found out that those old ones that I got from you, they're a different depth.
Gotcha.
After we get done
so
shooting,
he must have had a slightly longer board or a different battery or something back in the day. And as he's evolved, Fire Knock has changed things. Now, and anyway, when I gave him to Brad, I told him, I go, beware, make sure you're careful with these because these are old and they can work, but you have to use these knocks. And he didn't hear it.
I just was like, I need to throw them in, put my same knocks on because
he was throwing them in as we were going up there at 6 a.m. to meet Cody to target. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like,
spaced it.
I forgot my knocks, and he's doing it on my tailgate. Mm-hmm. We're all in the vehicle, heading up the shuttle. I left him behind. He had to walk up there, but
400-yard walk is terrible.
It's terrible, but. Yeah, I think anyway, that was kind of what happened there. But let's go into the arrow builds. So years ago, I've been shooting the Valkyrie for quite a long time since I met Brent Hahn, and I really like it. I love the front of center. I like the center pin. I like the micro diameter shafts. Mm-hmm. I like that heavy FOC front of center weight on my arrows. I like that micro diameter shaft. It doesn't catch the wind as much. I like the smaller fletchings on the back. I like the weight in the back to be minimal with the weight on the front still heavy.
Yep.
And so, that's kind of where I went, and you guys turned me on to a stronger helical.
Yeah.
On the 3 fletch, and I was shooting some 4 fletch that Brent had, with the little AAE, like shield vanes and stuff like that. Well, you gave me those, and I shot better. I had better groups. They were a little more, seemed forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so then Brad toyed around with them, and I've done 4 fletch. I've done off. I've done 3. I've done all kind blazer vanes. I've done it all. It seems like with the the setups that you have with the heavy front of center, and these are 525 grain arrows, basically.
Right.
Mine are 524, 525.
Yeah.
You're talking about a pretty heavy arrow.
Oh yeah.
And then you add, and it's a lot, and it's still heavy FOC.
Yeah.
And it's got those veins on it. And I feel like it just cuts for Western hunting, especially for all hunting, really, but for Western. When I'm up on that tack and the wind is ripping, I need an arrow that can cut the wind.
Mm-hmm.
When I have to shoot through a bush, I need an arrow that's going to punch through that bush and stay on target and still have some heavy. And then I need an arrow that can punch through a bone or a shoulder or all that. A hunting arrow to me, I feel like, and you can chime in here, but I feel like there's a lot of really good archers out there that have grown up just 3D target shooting. They're all about accuracy out to 100 yards. They're hyper obsessed with their accuracy, and especially at longer ranges. And
well, they want this arrow to shoot good with this bow, and vice versa. Like, this bow likes these arrows. We don't do that. We do basically like, I want this arrow setup that's heavy, that's shooting this.
Yeah, what I was going to say.
And we're going to tune the bow to that arrow.
Right.
What I was going to say is, I feel like there's an emphasis in shooting for archery and 3D, and then there's this emphasis on arrows for hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not the same thing. And for us, the end goal, I'm not into, I don't know, redding or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not this 3D shooter. I don't mind going. I think it's fun, but that's not my focus. My focus is hunting.
Right.
I want to get that giant buck,
Right.
that big elk. That's my thing. I want a setup that delivers that to
Right.
me in my hand. And I feel like that's what I'm shooting and what I'm running. And when someone else comes in and looks at that from the outside, that's hyper focused on 3D and archery and all that,
Mm-hmm.
they might discount my setup, being like, yeah, there's so much better rigs out there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's I've had a lot of talks with Brent. Obviously we're one of the few places that can carry his system and
The Valkyrie
archery system. And then, I've talked to different guys I know in the industry that are professional archers that even work for different arrow manufacturers. And, because I want to get all their feedback and then go, like, what are we doing here? Are we building the best setup I can for my customers, right? And at the end of the day, I go, I want to build a setup that is going to give a guy the best chance of being successful. Because once that arrow leaves your bow on an animal,
right.
There's still luck involved. There's still factors you cannot control at that point.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, as far as building the Valkyrie archery system, I love it. We sell a ton of it here. If a guy can afford it and get into it, we highly recommend it, because the feedback that we continually hear from our customers, guys like it. And guys that are coming in going, yeah, if I make a perfect shot with just about anything we sell in the shop, it should get the job done.
Right.
Well, and Brad, he went another route where we're shooting the same arrows. We both have X impact, the micro
Black Eagle,
diameter
Yeah.
arrow shafts, same fletchings, same nocks. What Brad did though with the tip, instead of using Valkyrie, he's using the FOC inserts from Black Eagle,
Mhm.
and then he's getting that weight at the front, and he's got a collar. Instead of having a center pin broadhead,
Yep.
he's got a collar that sort of achieves
Very
this,
similar.
Very similar.
Yes. Yep.
a similar result,
Mhm.
where then he can put like a more standard broadhead. He shoots
Yeah.
the Annihilator
Yeah.
on there, and now he has basically way cheaper
Yep.
version of the Valkyrie setup.
For sure.
Yeah.
Before we move on from that, what's your take on the two?
I would be fine with either system, really. I mean, again, if it's working for him from A to B, he's killing animals. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Right. I am a fan of high FOC. Through all the years, I've been, higher the FOC I've shot. Seems like I'm getting better results. And the biggest thing to that is nowadays with laser rangefinders, slider sights, it's really easy to know, okay, I got 80 yards. Where's my pin? We're not guessing anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
The hardest part of that shot is, what's my arrow doing in the wind?
Right.
Like that, how far off am I happen to hold off that animal based off the wind direction and how fast it is? So to that point, like a smaller diameter arrow, so let's say we talk a 166 shaft to a 246.
Mm-hmm.
It helps. It's not as much as you think, but it definitely helps. What I feel like is the biggest factor is the FOC percentage in the shaft. That is really, that arrow wants to roll in the air. and it doesn't push the same way in the wind. And so a higher FOC arrow, in my opinion, is one of the biggest factors for forgiveness at wind at those longer distances.
Well, you can see in like our TAC video and stuff, and even shooting at the house, when there's high wind, because we're shooting, there's 5 different guys shooting different arrows. Brian and I have a very similar setup.
Right.
With the heavy front up there. I mean, we're like 18+%, 17+% on the front end of that arrow. And you'll watch that closer to 20, exactly. And as that'll come out, it's literally like the point stays
on target.
If you took a string and you took it from your pins to the target, that point, your arrow tip stays on there. Now, the back end of that arrow may not.
It rolls.
It rolls.
Yes.
But guess what? It's hitting the point that you want. Where other arrows, it pushes it to the left.
The whole
or right.
shaft pushes offline.
And you hit different impacts.
Yes. Exactly.
So let me just tell you a little experience. I years ago when I was really learning, I was shooting with some guys that were really good with archery in general. Did a lot of obsessive archery tuning and setting up, and very good at long ranges too. But they would set up these arrows, right? And they'd grab like 5 different arrow brands, different builds. They'd get different nocks, and they did different broadheads, and they would build with different helical or offsets. And they build these arrows and they number them all. Then they go out with that bow and they would shoot 100-yard shots and see which one was stacking into the target. And usually the lighter arrow would, we're talking like 6 o'clock in the morning, summer, no sun is up, dead calm, no wind.
Yep.
Arrows stacking in there. Beautiful. Like pretty flat shooting rig, lighter arrows. And so then they're like, this one's the one. This one's the one. This arrow, this bow just eats it. It loves it. This is such and I get
430 grain arrows.
When I run this setup though, with this fletching configuration, I'm at 100 yards. The arrow hits the dirt. This arrow will hit it at 100. This one will hit the dirt at 95.
Yeah.
The range just killed it.
Right.
It wasn't anywhere close. And so they would figure it out like, this is what I want for this sort of situation, right? And I felt like then we would go out and hunt, or we'd shoot in the afternoon and there would be some wind, and they would like feel the wind, and they shoot 3 or 4 times a day. They'd feel the wind and they'd be like, I need to hold on the shoulder or on the front of the chest to hit it into the vitals. Mm-hmm. And they were good. And they put it there.
Yeah.
Because they could just kind of wind gauge it.
Right.
And it was almost like artillery. They would shoot the one and they go, oh, need to wind adjust this much more. I'm like, this does not reflect hunting.
No.
And I don't want to have to pay attention to that. So I had my arrows built at the time, and I had gone to one of my first TAC events. And we were in Utah. It was, I forget where that one was held. Fancy Utah ski resort place.
Was it Park City or
no,
Snow Basin?
That. Snow Basin.
There you go.
Is that the one?
Yeah, that was where they originally started.
That's the original
one.
one. And there was this shot where I felt like everything was calm where I was at, and the target was over there, and it was rock.
Yeah.
Couldn't see any bushes moving. Well, up that was like a wind tunnel.
Yeah.
Just ripping up that thing. And I shot, and my arrow just went and completely missed.
Yeah.
Just a little push of the wind, and it just completely went off target.
Yeah.
And what I started to realize was I got so frustrated on that particular course because it's a super windy course. The wind was wicked up there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got on the right course and you didn't have the right arrow, you were adjusting major amounts to try to compensate for wind. When I started shooting the Valkyrie, all that went away. To this day, I do not adjust for wind.
Never.
At all.
Yeah.
Ever. Because even if like some of these shots at the Western, I might adjust, I guess, if it's like a hurricane. But for just your standard normal, you can barely hold it steady in the wind.
Yeah.
I don't adjust anymore.
Well, a lot of guys, the problem with wind is a lot of guys, one, they don't practice enough in it to know what their equipment's going to do.
Right.
But number two, a lot of times the wind is hitting the shooter so heavy with the bow, you don't know when you're sending that arrow, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's coming to center and you're hitting the send it now button.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, let's see where this lands, So it's really hard for guys to test a lot of these theories in wind because not unless you're, standing in a building or a shed and shooting outside to where the wind's hitting you, can you really truly get in a feel of what is my arrow doing in the wind at distance, But I do think The heavier arrow helps for sure.
Mhm.
The smaller diameter helps, and the higher FOC. And then typically with that too, when you run a higher FOC arrow, I do feel like you can reduce the amount of vanes on the back of the shaft because now the point weight is pulling the shaft through the air.
Correct.
I don't need as much steering on the backside that I used to.
Yeah, what does Brent call it? A broadhead delivery system?
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
he call it an arrow?
And
You
so,
know?
so basically what it is like
Yeah.
you're tying a piece of yarn, a string
Yep.
to a rock, and you throw it. The string is obviously not steering that rock.
Yeah.
The rock is steering the
It's
string.
all that weight's pulling everything that way. And so,
Correct.
yeah, I think, and I think what has changed through the 20 years that I've done this too is the arrows that we have now are capable of doing that. Years ago, what would happen is the type of carbon material they'd use, like I've tried doing this years ago and it never worked because by the time I kept increasing my FOC on my arrow,
You had a 650 grain arrow.
one, it was super heavy,
Yeah.
and two, it would break down the spine too much. The shaft wouldn't handle it, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so let's
Wasn't
say
stiff enough.
it wasn't stiff enough. So then I'm like, well, I got to go to a stiffer arrow. Well, every time I went to a stiffer arrow, guess what? The grains per inch of the arrow also went up.
Yeah.
Right.
So overall, I
Now
wasn't getting
now
the
you're-
FOC.
You're effective out to 30 yards.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I got to.
This is where my mind went
Yeah.
back in the day was instead of doing that, I just put the weight tubes in like the gold tip
Yeah,
arrows.
yeah,
You know?
And the heavier helps, I think,
Right.
but yeah, the FOC is like where, if we're a guy that wants to have a heavy arrow, that's great, but where are we putting the weight at, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Do I want to shoot an arrow that's 11 or 12 grains per inch? Not anymore.
Not anymore.
I want an arrow that's, 9.95.
8.6,
Yeah. Or,
With all the weight up front.
But the newer arrows, they're stiffer now. They can handle the weight up front. And so now guys are able to get the higher FOC. The arrow will still handle it and steer it. And then, man,
There's a whole camp of people out there who hate, who get pissed off about FOC discussions.
yeah.
They're like, you just need a heavy arrow. Shut up. It doesn't matter if the weight's up front or not. That's not been my experience,
Mine either.
especially in heavy wind.
Yeah.
If it's uniformly distributed weight, even if it's heavy, it does help.
Yeah.
But it still moves the whole shaft. I still have to compensate for wind to an extent.
Yep.
Where with FOC, I don't.
Yeah, I feel like if you were to take two arrows, let's say you take like your setup, a 525 grain arrow,
Uh-huh.
18% FOC, and we build another arrow that's the same weight, but our FOC percentage is down around 8 to 10%, which is
Right.
pretty standard for a lot of those.
Correct.
I will put money on it that high FOC arrow the shaft is gonna roll in the wind like we talked about, and I still hold off a little bit, but instead of an 8 to a 10-inch hold, I can do a 3 or 4. And I'm still right in there, right? And so I am a believer in the fact that higher FOC arrows cut through the wind better, the shaft rolls better, and now I can reduce a little bit of vane on the back. I don't need to run as much steering, and the arrow just reacts better.
Now, what about this? Because I do believe that the helical, the severe right helical that I have on mine,
Mhm.
it definitely is going to slow that arrow down. I can see it just spinning through the air.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. And if you go back and you watch our video, you can see lots of Brad and I's arrows just like
Yeah.
twisting their way there. And you'll have people who will say, you don't need that. Go with a straight or just an offset 3 vane. You'll get a lot more distance out of your arrow
For sure.
So what's the theory and why are you guys pushing that?
Yeah. So the most of our fletchings we like to do here is on that Arizona. It's called tree helical. It's a little different, right?
Yeah.
So a normal helical, you're taking that vane, you're rolling it really steep on the shaft. You're going to have a lot of side pressure, and it creates drag. I've seen it. I've had setups where my sight tape to 80 is good, but then to 100, I had to put a different whole sight tape on the damn thing.
Exactly.
To hit 120,
Exactly.
like I'm literally splicing, sight tapes together to hit 120 because there was so much drag. The new system they have, one reason I like it, one, it works well, but two, I can fletch all 3 vanes at once.
Right.
I love that. I hate building arrows. It takes so much time, so I can put 3 vanes on and it works. But through the feedback we get from our customers, and I have this conversation thousands of times a year with guys of what's working, what's not working, and I'll have a guy who will come in. Let's say I built him 12 arrows, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to take, and I'll say, okay, you're going to get 3 arrows built this way, 3 arrows built this way, and we will send that guy out the door with 4 different vane configurations. We're going to do a true helical, we're going to do an offset, we're going to do try a 4 fletch. Like, here's different batches. You go out and shoot them, and I'll tell guys, you'd come back and tell me what worked the best for you, and I will refletch your other 9 arrows for free. I'll do it. We'll strip them down and match whatever you like.
Yeah.
And time again, that true helical 3-fletch wins the majority of the time. Guys come back in and go, that was the best groups I was shooting. Now, granted, to other guys' points, yes, it might have more drag. It might not be able to shoot as far, but if the end result is accuracy, yeah, maybe I'm losing 5 yards at distance, but my groups are tighter. The broadheads are flying better. I'll take that versus an arrow that I can shoot a little farther with, but my groups open up.
Well, I noticed because I messed around. Like I used to fletch arrows, and I'm a tinkerer when it comes to archery stuff. Brian has figured this out, and I've tried to dial it down. But I would take a 4-fletch, a 3-fletch, a helical, right helical, left helical, depending on whatever bow.
Yeah.
But I noticed one thing with those Arizona Easy Fletch with the really tight helical,
the true helicals,
they correct way faster.
Yeah.
Way faster.
You can see the arrow come out of a bow, and say you torqued it or you did something a little bit off and it comes off a little wonky. It seems to correct faster. Because if you watch those slow motion videos, you'll see these other arrows come out, and they'll come out cockeyed, and they'll be going like that for a long time, and then they'll flatten out and they'll finally find their way.
Yeah.
With us, it's almost like it's almost instant where it just shoots right on.
Yeah.
In that regard, it seems to make sense, right? You have a more aggressive vane configuration, which is going to catch more wind, which is going to force the arrow in its true path faster. The downside, more drag.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to have more drag.
Yeah, but the true helical concept really originated from guys that were shooting model rockets. They had these competitions that they were trying to shoot these rockets, and whoever could shoot the highest would win, right? And so they came up with this concept going, hey, when we launch a rocket, the faster we can get to stabilize, the higher we're going to get, right? And so I talked to Randy that owns that company, and he told me the whole story of his buddies shooting these model rockets, and he's like, what are you putting on the back of these rockets? He's like, oh, this is what we figured out. And he's like, well, let's put that on fletchings.
Yeah.
And there you go, and so, but yeah, it works for guys. And,
because I think if you have this really dialed, tuned bow and you really know what you're doing and all that, and you shoot these clean shots, then, you can shoot almost any arrow.
Well, and
almost any arrow, bear shaft,
correct.
Yeah.
But if you want, it seems to me, if you want a setup where you're looking for forgiveness, it feels like it's, at least for me, I'm no great, like, profound archery genius, okay? Right. But, I'm stacking them at 80 yards in a little pie plate with my setup with a 525 grain arrow, which I know will crush a deer or an elk or a moose or something. So I kind of have a hard time being, because, look, I'm not anal about this stuff.
Right.
Like, I'm not 365 just playing with bow stuff. But if I'm stacking at 86 yards, which is like where my sight tape ends right now, because I don't want a slider, and I don't do the oval. I can't line that up.
Me neither.
Dude.
I'm not a fan.
So right now, I'm shooting 279 feet per second. 525 grain arrow.
Yeah.
When that thing flies, and I'm in that kill zone, pie plate at 80, 85. I'm perfectly content with that.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I know I'm not like some pro, but I'm still in that group. So, it's hard for me to say you ought to change it.
Well, the thing is, it's like you take your setup, like I said, you're shooting 279 feet per second. You have the little disadvantage with the shorter draw length, but you're shooting super heavy arrows. You're still getting out there almost 90 yards.
Right.
Or I'm shooting like almost the exact same setup. Now with the different nocks, I'm like 515, 518 grain arrows. I'm shooting 291 because I have the advantage of a longer draw length. It's 78-pound bow. And I can get out right now. I can get out to like 122, 124 on like an option sight. So you can still get, which is way more than you need. Way more.
I'm like 11 or 12 feet per second slower than Brad overall.
Right.
But I could too if I have plenty of room if I wanted to put a slider on there.
Correct.
I think I could go to 115.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yep. Yeah.
With that same heavy arrow.
And what I'm getting at is like with those heavy arrows, we can still get distance.
Yeah.
You can still get distance if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. And I mean, the problem is like everyone's setup's different. Like for most guys, let's say a guy that's, decent draw length, can run a 70-pound bow. My goal is to try to build him as heavy of an arrow as I can, but not drop below 270. That's my threshold for most guys, right? Yeah. Anything slower than that, we're giving up too much speed for the weight.
Correct.
But
Yeah,
I've built setups for women. I've built setups for kids, like, guys that are getting older that can't, they can't pull 70 pounds anymore. They're 55 pounds, right? And so, my goal is to try to build them the most lethal setup I can. Sometimes budget's a factor we got to take into account, but the advantage we have is like, decent draw length, 80 pounds. So we can take a 525 grain arrow and still shoot it really fast.
Right.
The advantage I feel like with that is shot angles are less critical now. Like I tell you guys, I don't want to promote unethical shots, but there are certain setups that I just will not let my wife shoot. Like if it's elk, I can't tell you how many elk have been quartering away or quartering towards her and she's at full draw. I'm like, don't shoot. You're not sending it, right? Because knowing her setup, it's not going to have a good result. Yeah. But with our setups, I'm like, I can punch through that. Yeah, I can punch through that. Like I don't worry about it.
Especially like if I use a mechanical, which I plan on to use on a couple of hunts.
Yeah.
That death switch. Yeah. 200 grain head. I'm not too worried about it. With that much heavy poundage behind it, it goes right in and goes all the way through.
I feel like with especially with like the Valkyrie system is like 9 times out of 10, if a guy's running a good arrow, good broadhead, he's probably, with a decent, he's going to have a good result. It's that moment where an animal turns on you, or it's a less than optimal. You got a bull comes in and it's that front quartering shot, which a lot of guys are really nervous on going, do I send it or do I not? With the Valkyrie system, I'm going to send it because my confidence that it's going to perform and do what it's supposed to do. So, there's other factors though. You got to talk about, arrow yield. When an arrow gets fired, it's paradoxing. It's flying like a little wet noodle, right? The longer an arrow takes to stabilize in flight, the less accuracy you're going to have, and poor penetration too. I've seen tests where, I was talking with Dorge at Fire Knock about this, where they've done a test where they had a 350 grain arrow that could outpenetrate a 500 grain arrow based off how is the arrow impacting. So the other side of Brent's system with high FOC. Yeah, it's better. I do feel it's better in long distance in the wind, but that arrow recovers faster dynamically out of the bow because you're running a stiffer arrow now. So when you launch, that paradoxing recovers faster. That weight starts to pull. So that arrow now is impacting animals and targets straighter. And that's a significant factor for penetration that a lot of guys don't even understand the concept behind.
Yeah. I was listening to THP talk to the dude at Ranch Ferry going over arrows, and they were talking about the weight of some of these arrows that they were building. I was like, that's a hard no. I mean, you're talking about so much weight.
Yeah.
That if you're whitetail hunting and you're in a tree stand and so forth, and you're maxing out at 30, 35, 40 yards distance, fine. I could see a lot of wisdom in that, man. You could punch through anything you want with that load.
Yeah. Until the deer gets out of the way before the arrow gets there too, right?
Yeah. So it is quieter though.
Yeah, it is.
But so here's my problem though is it's just not realistic for Western hunting for me, for how I want to hunt. I don't want that slow of an arrow, and I don't want that slow of that limited range of a distance. So there's lots of ways to skin a cat.
Yeah.
Like I don't disagree with that. You just got to know the limitations of that design. Same with what you're talking about with your wife and building arrows for her.
Yep.
The weight, the speed of her arrow, the broadhead, you're going to choose a certain type of broadhead with her.
100%.
You're probably not throwing on a light little arrow that's really short with low poundage, a big, giant, fat mechanical head that she's going to have to try to punch through, and it won't do.
Right.
But a sleek, sharp, like Jagger broadhead, lethal, right?
Yeah. For sure.
And so there's more than one way to skin a cat, and I think that you just got to know what it is that your goal is and what you're building. I freaking love this heavy front of center, micro diameter shaft, and true helical 3-fletch design. It's proving to be an excellent setup for me for that blend of everything that I want. Cut the wind, recover quickly. I shot a deer a few years back. It was like 92 yards. It's my longest shot. But I had been shooting all day long. I was there with other dudes that are really good shots, like John Barklow. We've been practicing all week, morning till dark. Like every day, you hunt in the morning, you come back, you shoot all day.
Yeah.
Man, I was stacking them in the plate at like 95, 90 in there, and I'm like, this is the last day of the hunt. I'm like, screw this, man, because I had deer like 75 up to 90 all week long.
Yeah.
I just was like, I'm not going to take that shot. I'm going to take a shot I'm really confident I'm going to make. Well, by the end of that week, I'm like, I can make this shot. I put like 10 for 10 in this 90 like an hour ago.
Right.
By dang it, if I see a mule deer, I'm smoking it. And so I stepped out, mule deer, here it is, 92 yards, put it up. It was the Jagger, and I was shooting my fixed blade broadhead, so I knew that they were hitting. I wasn't shooting practice tips and then shooting broad. I was practicing with
broadheads,
the broadhead I actually shot with. So I sharpened it up just before I left, put it in the quiver. It's the same arrow I put into that target at 90, 94. So stepped out. There's the deer. Repeated the same thing I'd done like an hour earlier.
Nice.
Smoked it. That arrow, as it went through the air, it kind of wobbles a little bit, and then it's stable. And I was talking to Brent about this. Like, it seemed to me that it loses speed the further it gets from when it left. But he talked about how the straighter it gets, the longer it's in the air, the more the power is lined up exactly behind the tip.
That's the paradoxing. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the more an arrow, when it comes out of your bow, it's flexing and bending, right?
Right.
The longer that arrow has time to recover and stabilize. And the analogy I use for customers all the time to explain this to them, if I was to put a nail on this board here that's straight, and I put another nail next to it and I bend it, and I said, Brian, hit each one of those with a hammer, what's going to happen? Right?
Exactly.
So, if you hit a nail that's straight, hit right on the head, boom, it's going to drive all the way through. But it doesn't matter how straight you try to hit the bent nail, it's going to roll. So an arrow impacting an animal or a target is no different. And so if you get these guys that are running these, say, 600 grain arrows, and the arrow itself is not stiff enough, they fire, it comes out like bending like a wet noodle. At that point, it don't matter how heavy your arrow is. It's not hitting straight enough for that energy to drive. And so, there's more factors than just the weight of the arrow when it comes to penetration, right? Like build as heavy as you want, but the more that arrow's flexing and bending, you're not going to have good results. So.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising because the arrow went through, hit the rib on the one side, went through the body cavity, came through the other side, and it hit the thickest part of the bone on the offside front shoulder leg, the shoulder bone. And I've posted videos of it before. It hit it and it shattered, and the sound was like on a pool table where you
break the ball,
it just went snap. Like we could all hear it from those guys were watching through spotters at like 300 yards away when they heard it go just like a gunshot, almost like
wow.
That Valkyrie went in and just exploded it into about 5 pieces and severed it, and the leg just became nothing. It was useless. It was swinging around, but But it seemed like it was just line drive. By the time it got there, the efficiency behind the tip was so exact. It just couldn't. None of that the bones or anything else could stop it from just hot knife through butter.
Yeah, arrow recovery out of the bow is so important, especially for, longer shots like that. Just about any arrow will recover at that distance, and you probably would have had a good result, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
If you were to build an arrow that's the same weight, but not high FOC, at that point, that arrow is recovered enough where the penetration is going to be pretty similar. Mm-hmm. Where it really matters, and why Brent really built that system is more for the short distance shots, right? Especially elk hunters. So I had a buddy a couple of years ago. He was going to Africa, built a setup, and he calls me. He goes, "Hey, I'm really confused." I'm like, "What's going on?" He's like, "At 20 yards, my arrow goes," and it was a heavy arrow. He's hunting dangerous game. Mm-hmm. At 20 yards, he's like, "My arrow goes halfway into my target." At 30, it's to my fletchings, but at 40, it blew through my target and ended up in my field. So I had to explain to him the concept of the arrow paradoxing on target. So,
because you think closer, there's more power from the bow, therefore it should penetrate. And then as I get further back, it penetrates less, but it's not true.
Not true. No, that, even though you're going to lose speed at distance, if the arrow's recovered better. So what you want is an arrow that's going to recover as fast as dynamically out of the bow. And so when you typically with guys that are running higher FOC, we're having to go to a stiffer arrow to handle the point weight anyway. But some of these newer arrows, there's some arrows you can get that are, they're a 300 spine, which is pretty stiff, that only weigh 8.8 grains per inch. Right. There's some even that are lighter than that.
Yeah.
But So now I can get an ultra lightweight shaft, and I can stiff arrow. I can load up the front of what the FOC that I want.
Yeah.
And so overall, I can build an arrow set up for me that's, 470 to 480 grains.
Mm-hmm.
That's the FOC that I want, smaller diameter, and I'm still cranking that arrow at my draw length at 290 feet per second. It's the best. And then my draw length and poundage helps, but I really get the best of all the worlds at that point. So
following us dudes around and filming our shots, which Brad and I have been doing a lot lately with a long lens and stuff, and just watching the trajectory and the flight of the arrows, I've been able to analyze a lot of arrows in flight.
Yeah.
Because 25 targets times 5 dudes, that's
125
targets plus Brad and I doing our shoot-offs. You're talking 150 video arrows in flight, videos of arrows in flight in slow motion, 120 frames per second, slowed down to 10% or whatever.
Right.
And you're watching this arrow fly. I'm seeing, and I'm not naming names except Jake Powers, those arrows that are like lighter and they fly, they kind of fly out, and they got that paradox and the wonkiness, and they take quite a while. Quite a while to recover, and then they finally start to really recover. There are times where those arrows come out and they are not going. The target gets there before the arrow has recovered, and you can see when it's sticking in a target all lopsided.
Yeah,
what has happened there? Where like with Brad and I, you watch our arrows. I mean, almost the second they leave the bow, they seem to be just straight, and I think it's a combination of, maybe it's doing the same thing with a different fletching setup. Probably would if our bows are really well tuned and we're great shooters. But I just like knowing that when it's not, and you can see it, like Brad loses his knock. Yeah. I'm sorry, dude. That arrow, when his knock flies out, and so does the weight.
With the insert, like I'm shooting much heavier than a regular knock. I'm shooting like 18, 19, 20 grains in the back of the arrow just in the knock.
Right.
Versus 7.
And the knock stayed stuck, and then you had the weight shifting out the back.
Yeah, and it's all coming out. Mm-hmm. And the arrow's still recovered. If you're still hitting the target, that's telling you your arrow's recovering.
Yeah.
It's recovering like mad. Like the weight on the front, I think, is the biggest factor. Mm-hmm. But those fletchings too, it seems like they recover that wobble where it sticks on the string, but it still comes out, loses the weight in the back, and it corrects and goes.
Yeah.
And same thing when he hits a bush. Like Brad hits this branch straight on, and you could see that branch is a thick one, and it's falling now as it went through, and that arrow's like, and then it fixes itself.
Yeah.
Hits the target.
Yeah, I think it's that point weight that just, it says, hey, I'm in charge. I'm pulling the rest of you with me. Mm-hmm. Wherever that front weight's going, that arrow's now, it's forced to follow it at that point, you know?
So I watch these guys that I really respect that have been shooting archery forever, that are very, I appreciate what they've contributed to the hunting space, to archery, all that. But when I see some of them talk about their arrow rigs, and they have a strong opinion in how it should be built, how an arrow rig should be built, and how much better off you'd be with a different design, back to the whole, there's multiple ways to do the same.
For sure.
You can do it. Ranch Fairy, you got the lightweight rig, community, all that, different fletching designs, no FOC, heavy FOC. For me, I look at all that and I take it all in and I go, look, for hunting, for what I want to accomplish, I truly don't think you're out there with something that is beating what I've got.
Yeah.
And I get it. You've been in this space a long time. And I go up against guys that have strong opinions all the time.
Yeah.
And we have these arguments. And I'm not trying to have an argument. Yeah. I'm just like, look, you have your opinion, I have mine.
Right.
And this is where I'm at. And I've proven through my effort. And one of the things I don't like is an appeal to authority. They don't give a damn. Okay. Yeah. I don't care how many, what your
accolades are,
what the accolades are. I want to see, I want to see, it's like when, the Fauci ouchie. It's like when he's like, but I'm this guy. Right. So therefore debate over.
Right.
It's like, no. That does zero for me. I want to have the discussion. I want you to, I want to have this argument and this debate with facts and information, not with, I'm so-and-so, so therefore
Yeah.
it's the end of
This
the
is
discussion.
what works for me. And, you know, the way I look at that is I do feel like there needs to be a little bit of a change in our industry. Like some of the technology and the equipment we have now, it's getting better and better, right? It's not 10 years ago or 15 years ago, what was working then is different than now.
Totally different.
Right? Totally different. And secondly, it's like, you know, there's some of those guys out there, to your point, that go, this is my setup, this is what works, so everybody else build it off of this. Like this is my platform, and go. But for me, again, I've done this for 20 years. I've set up so many guys, and I hear feedback from customers constantly, and I take everything in.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, like this guy went out and had a hunt, and he had poor result, this happened. And then when I start hearing feedback, and I can kind of all put it together and go, overall, what is working? And when I'm getting that positive feedback over and over and over, I'm going, there's got to be something that's working. If it's worked for this many guys and they're all coming back in going
Different levels of
shooters, and they'll come back and go, build me more of this.
Well, I like that because there's so many bows, so many individuals, so many different skill levels, you know, kind of going out and coming back and saying, okay, these are the sort of things that are working for me.
Right.
But I do think there's a difference. I think there's quite a difference sometimes between the hunter and the shooter.
Yeah.
You know, the archery shooter and the hunter. Like I'm back there looking at Cody's setup, and we're talking about that and all that. And I'm like, dude, he'll outshoot me on a course all the time. But when it comes to killing an animal, I'll beat him. And so there's just a different kind of setup there
for sure,
and an approach. And I think it's really hard for me to transition more into the shooter space, and really hard for the shooter to transition more into the hunting rig space. But I'm trying to blend them together. Don't get me wrong. Like I do value that community. I want to pull it in, but I don't want to sacrifice.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's what we've done with like our arrow setups. It's like we're still shooting super fast, but we're shooting heavy.
Yeah.
So we've kind of intertwined the two.
Yeah.
More modern arrow, lighter weight but stiffer. Mm-hmm. Try to get your FOC percentage up. I feel like that 18 to 21 is a really good threshold to try.
And it's hard to get 21.
If you don't have the right arrows, you can't. Here's what I've seen guys do is they'll take their old arrows that they have and then try to load up 21%, and they'll come and go, this sucks.
Yeah.
I don't like it. And I go, well, your arrow can't handle that, right?
You're still shooting a 204 arrow.
It's like, you got to have the right tools. It's all got to work together as a system. Mm-hmm. If you try to just do one thing without fixing another, you're not going to have a good result from it.
I love the setup. I'm going to continue rocking that. The fire knock I like that. That's another discussion for another day because we run out of time. He's been shooting the halo knock, and this is something I would love to bounce off of you. Greg Ritz made it his goal to shoot out my $20 knock on every target. And they certainly have their drawbacks, but I just shooting lighted knocks is just more fun for me.
Yeah.
It's just more fun. Now, sometimes for people, the cost isn't worth the fun.
Well, and
we discussed that too.
Yeah, we want us to do it on a whole nother one because I've been comparing a couple different knocks.
A
lot, you know.
So Jeremiah, he is the luckiest man on earth, and he drew a sheep tag.
Yeah.
A desert bighorn sheep.
Yep.
And they only do 2 tags?
So for the archery hunt, so I drew an archery only hunt.
Yeah.
And there's only two tags, so I got one of them.
Okay, I'm going to film this hunt. And there's no pressure to perform, none. But your heroism or your failure will be there for the world to see.
Man, not only is it a once in a lifetime, but then you're putting that other pressure. Thanks. Yeah.
Hey, I carved out 3 weeks if it takes 3 weeks. I don't know if you've got 3 weeks, but
I've got the whole hunt off. Yeah,
okay,
I'm not coming back.
He's got 30 days.
Yeah, I guess I could go 4 weeks if I have to, but that's. But I'm looking forward to it, and it's got me really interested in sheep in general. I started doing some reading about sheep in preparation for this hunt. I bought a couple books. Even I'm a nerd, and they're fascinating.
Yeah,
bighorn sheep, especially desert bighorn sheep.
Yeah,
I had no idea how impressive they are in the heat. In like what they eat, like they are truly incredible. I am in shock. They're like a lizard, but they're an ungulate. It's like the weirdest creature. I had no idea that how they regulated temperature and things like that I just took for granted, or water intake and all that. It's weird. It just doesn't seem like that's
possible.
Yeah. And then they just got giant horns. Yeah. So, I mean, hey. So anyway.
I'll admit, the sheep bug is real. After I had a tag in my pocket, it is real. It's all I think about now. I need more pay.
Yeah.
Sheep are expensive.
I want a sheep hunt so bad. But I'm going to have to live vicariously through you on this one. It'll be fun. It'll be really the first serious sheep hunt I've been on where I'm like, where I'm not just there for a day or two or, with someone else. Yeah. This will be cool. We'll have to, and it's archery. Yeah. So hopefully, Jeremiah, when you told me about the tag and I started thinking about it, I was like, no offense to other people out there who have mentioned having opportunities like this, but I thought if, I hate to film archery hunts because most people can't kill with a bow.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
Oh, it's tough.
They can, including myself for a long time. I'm a sneaky dude, and I can get in really close, and I can get that perfect, 40-yard moment.
Yeah.
And then I can just not make that shot at all. Thankfully, those days have.
Yeah, that's the younger me too.
Yeah. And so it's like when people come to me and they're like, "I got this goat, or got this sheep, or got this deer," and it's like, I love you, and you're gonna have a great hunt, but you're not gonna kill anything unless like it really comes together.
Stars got to align,
because there's so much that is in that archery journey, that is so hard to master. That getting that kill, in the bag, it takes a lot of years' experience. And so with you, I was like, man, I'd love to invest in the filming of that hunt, knowing that I'm not going with someone who's only shot a couple animals with a bow.
So no pressure on you.
No pressure,
Jeremiah.
Yeah.
Now, killing something on film is a whole different ballgame of pressure. So hopefully, I figure though, this will be good. I mean, this will only make you stronger.
It'll be epic. I don't know. For all the years that I've bow hunted and went to shoot shot, we'll see when we get there.
You've been under pressure.
I've been under pressure.
Yeah.
It's not I think the biggest thing is just getting within bow range. That's some of the terrain we're going to be in. It's incredible down there.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Getting in bow range, the cliffs, that kind of terrain.
Well, my two guides here, you guys, you'll get me close. I'll make the shot. We'll call it a day, man.
It'll be so fun. So hopefully we have enough scouting intel and information that we can make that thing a reality. So. Yeah, I'm excited.
Still a lot of work to put in, but some of the guys that I know through the industry, Jarrett, man, he had the tag last year. He saved me 10 scouting trips already to this point, just with all the information that he has.
His boots on the ground.
Oh yeah, just information would take me days or weeks to figure out. Just he has it. So
how big are these sheep that you're looking at down there? And is there a limitation on size or anything like that?
So I'm not the best at scoring sheep. This is one of those things I'm trying to learn, right?
Yeah.
And so they say for this unit, if you shoot with 160-inch ram, you're doing really good. But most of the sheep are in that 140, 150 range. And, my buddy Jared last year that had the tag, he passed some sheep. He had some opportunities, but his goal was, I want to shoot a 6.5-year-old or older. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a size thing; it was an age class
thing, correct?
And but they went 3 days without seeing a sheep. But once they relocated, got into them, and he told me, he's like, he burned, I think, 19 points last year, 19 years waiting, and he goes, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. And he came off the mountain without punching his tag, but he's like, just to have the opportunity. And, but I just was so fortunate that he had that tag, because now I get to start where he left off. Right?
Yeah, such an advantage.
Yeah. Huge advantage for me. And so plus, there is some, rifle guys that'll be in the unit before me. And I happen to have a good friend of mine that, his dad has the tag. So they're going to be down there on the rifle hunt and getting intel there. So, stars are kind of aligning to, for us to this point, to where, we'll go down and hunt as hard as we can. And it's bow hunting though, you could hunt as hard as you want, and things have to happen, right?
Yeah, that's the thing with bow hunting. It is such a, that's why we have a lot of bow hunts on the books this year.
Yeah.
one of the reasons for that is I've been wanting to produce more archery content. You know, it's hard to film. It's costly because your hunt, what you can do in a 5-day hunt with a rifle takes 10 with a bow, sometimes 15 with a bow. Bow hunting takes time.
Oh, for sure.
Because not everything can just happen quickly. Yeah. With a rifle, there's a certain sort of excitement that comes with having a rifle in hand because you know it's just a matter of once you see it, it's good as dead.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Your hunt's almost over at that
Almost
point.
over.
Yeah.
So the whole time you're like, it could be now. It could be now. It could be now. With a bow, it's kind of anticlimactic in that sense. It's like, well, we see it.
Yeah.
Hunt hasn't even started.
No. I got to get there.
Yeah. And then, then when you do get in bow range and it's over the shoulder and that kind of thing, absolutely it's epic. But it's hard to get that moment. And if you're self-filming, which I've done until Brad came along for years, you can't really get a good film out of it. Yeah. And it's more of a vlog, and so it's been something I've wanted to jump back to. And here we are. This year we have a lot of archery hunts on the books, but what I was going to say is part of the goal there is there's no guarantee with an archery hunt. You could spend 20 days and get zero. Right. That's just the way it is. So hopefully by adding, by having I think 6 archery hunts, we can get 3 epic kind of achievements on film. And these are not fancy sort of hunts. These are blue collar DIY type, tougher hunts. So, it's just, but archery is such a special thing. And I just have not produced enough of that type of content, even though we do a lot of it. It's time. So we got it carved out. We're going to film a lot of archery.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I'm super excited to have you guys on that hunt with me. And, not only for me, the content and everything is great, but this is something I want to look back on and relive those memories later on, because I'll never get this opportunity again in my life. But I mean, it's going to be fun to have you guys down there and share camp with you. And
that's
with not only that, but your guys' knowledge. I mean, you guys hunt a lot, working in the shop. Yeah, I've been on some hunts. I do it, but man, you guys have 6 hunts this year. I have 1,
I know. And so it definitely, we are lucky in where I will spend, there's 365 days in the year and we'll spend over 100 easy, 150 days in the field. And after stacking that up over
2 or 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah. And for me, 8, 9 years. Right. I've been able to stack up some abilities. And it's funny because when I hunted with my buddies years ago, like Ben and Anthony, they were always a little bit better at spotting game and where to go and how to get there than I was. But over time, I just got to more experience, more days in the field to the point where now I'm really confident in that part of it, so it will be fun. I think between the group of us, we will get it done. We just won't quit. No. And it'll be fun. So folks, thanks for tuning in to the show. Check out our TAC video if you want to see an archery competition on the mountain and see what that's like. And check out Wilde Arrow Archery Shop down here in Centerville, Utah. And we thank you for tuning in. Catch you on the next podcast. Stay gritty.